All right, so I'm just going to start the meeting off and then pass it to Jeff. But thank you all for participating in this Base SAMP meeting. As you all know from the Aquaculture Listserv, the purpose of this meeting is to present and discuss revisions to CRMC's current aquaculture permitting notification process, which would allow for an increased public understanding and access to proposed aquaculture planning. If you have a question, if you could put it in the chat, write it in the chat room or raise your virtual hand. When we get to the question and answer, we will, I will begin with that, with the question and answer, but we are going to hold off on that. With that, I'm going to pass it to Jeff Willis.
Thanks, Jen. I appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for making the time today to attend the working group meeting. This particular working group meeting, I'm actually very excited about because, as you all know, you have spent a significant amount of time helping us figure out what improvements we can make to the aquaculture process here at CRMC. We've heard a lot of different ideas. We've had a lot of different thoughts over those several months. And tonight we want to present to you a couple of those issues and what we're thinking about changing our process, changing our regulations, changing the way we do things. We want to run them by you. We want to get your input on whether or not you agree or can make it better or make changes to it. In particular, what we'd like to present tonight is our notification process. We've heard that loud and clear that needs to be better, it needs to be more transparent. Folks need to understand what's going on through the notification process. So not only do we want to show you some of the ideas we have on notification, but also the application process itself. We have an idea on how to make that an expanded process so that folks have a much better understanding of what's going on with an aquaculture application right from the very beginning. We anticipate getting far more input at the community level before an application actually becomes a formal reviewable project by CRMC. So thank you for taking this time so that we can make this presentation to you tonight. And again, I'm going to pass this off to Ben, our aquaculture coordinator, and he's got a number of ideas that we want to show you, and we're looking for your input. We don't necessarily have to have final input tonight, of course, but we are going to ask that you take a look at it, ask us critical questions, and get us any formal comments or final comments by the end of this month. Then we can compile all that and bring it back to you sometime in January or shortly into the new year. So with that, let me pass it off to either Ben or Jen, whoever is going to handle it from here. And again, thanks for taking the time, and I'll see you at the end of the presentation.
Yeah, I'm going to hand it to Ben. And while Ben is preparing, again, put your questions in the chat room. You can raise your hand, but we are not going to take any questions until Ben is done. Thank you. Ben, take it away.
Yes. All right. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
All right. So, and you can see the presentation?
We can. It looks good. It's not in presentation mode, but we can see it.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure how to, I've got two screens here too, so I apologize if it looks like I'm looking off screen and back and forth. I'm actually looking at you all now here and now looking at my presentation. So I'm going to just bear with me here, but I think this will work. So, so yes, this is CRMC's draft proposals to the working group. As Jeff mentioned, it the number one concern we've heard from the group through this process has been revolving around our stakeholder notification processes. There's basically two things here I want to talk about. One is the stakeholder notification processes that we're proposing, and also application development. And I'll get into that a little more, but just to review here, we are going to propose notice to coastal property owners within 500 feet of the proposed site boundaries of an aquaculture application. Also, within notification, we have our Listserv, Aquaculture Listserv tool, and and we will be using that at all phases of the application cycle as well. And with application development, what we're really talking about here is an expanded preliminary determination process to enhance the application development. And that's going to have some requirements such as a draft application and an applicant-led local scoping session before a PD meeting is even held. So to review exactly what I'm talking about, let's take a look at our application process. So I've really kind of chunked this out into 3 phases to kind of distill it to its most basic elements. The first phase is aquaculture, is the application development, followed by application review and final decision. Now you can see here the red box, and this is our new process that we're proposing with the draft application and scoping session. That is going to be before our normal preliminary determination process begins. So the focus really here is on application development in the earliest phase. And we will talk about some of these other phases as well as I go through the presentation as it relates to some of our notification proposals. So with notification, some of the processes we're talking about are the Aquaculture Listserv, which we have found to be a versatile tool for enhancing communication with all stakeholders. And we've been using that since July of 2021, and we got about 200 subscribers. We use this to provide notice of application proceedings at all 3 phases, all 3 of those phases that I outlined, sometimes multiple times within that phase. But that does include the PD meeting, 30-day public notices, Marine Fishery Council and Shellfish Advisory Panel meetings, and of course, any CRMC public hearings where an aquaculture decision is going to be made. So notification to the coastal property owners, this is actually going to be part of our new expanded PD process as well. And the purpose of this notification really is to help inform application development, so that early phase in the process. Coastal property owners within 500 feet of the proposal will receive notice, and they will receive the notice from the applicant initially at the earliest phase of application development. And the coastal property owners will have this opportunity through our new scoping session requirement to provide input and ask questions even before the PD is held. So this is a question I anticipated. Why 500 feet? Well, it's consistent with the other core aspects of our coastal resource management program, that is the Red Book, with regards to water type categories. There are 6 water types in the program, and they are linked to the characteristics of the shoreline, actually. So because the activities on the adjacent mainland are the primary determinant of the uses and qualities of any specific water site. So the water type along the shoreline generally runs parallel to the shoreline and extends 500 feet seaward from the mean high water mark. So this is just, I found to be consistent with the program, in that if something is happening on the shore, it could be expected to affect that specific water site up to 500 feet from the mean water. So just to kind of reverse that in the mirror image, if something is happening 500 feet from the shoreline, it would make sense that perhaps the notification occurs within that radius. So to see what this looks like visually, well, at least with regards to our water types anyways, this is just a screenshot, map I made showing the different water types in CRMC, and you can see the bands along the shorelines in different colors. Those represent some of the different water types. The blue in the middle is also a different water type, but it's not so much the focus is on what water type we're talking about. You can see there's many different kinds of water types. Aquaculture is allowed in all water types, but the principle is based on the fact that that 500-foot distance is considered in other aspects of the program, and about 70% of Rhode Island shoreline is categorized in this way, with a 500-foot categorization from the mean high water. So going back to our process diagram, This is our process diagram with some of the added notification requirements that we're proposing. The green triangles, that means notification to that property owner listed on the application. That would be those within 500 feet, right? You can remember that because the green triangle, it's like a tree, it's like the shore. The stars, that shows where we will be notifying through our aquaculture listserv. So you can see in a lot of instances, we'll be notifying both through the listserv and directly to the listed property owners on the application. Particular note is we will be notifying of Shellfish Advisory Panel or Marine Fisheries Council meetings. That was something we previously had not anticipated, but we have actually, since the creation of the listserv, we've not had any Shellfish Advisory Panel meetings related to aquaculture. So going forward, we will be using that tool to notify the general public of those meetings. So I'm going to try to unpack that red box that you saw previously in the diagram. This is, again, focused on phase one, the aquaculture application development. So it begins with the draft application that's submitted to CRMC. When that application is, considered complete, we will post that on the listserv, and then there'll be a scoping session held by the applicant. Now there may be revisions that come out of this scoping session, and as you can see, if that revision is result in a different location, well then we may have to go back to a new draft, a new scoping session. But the idea is once an application is ready, it would move towards a preliminary determination meeting, in which case those property owners would also receive notification. So we're going to go through this diagram a little bit more with some more words on the screen, but bear with me. Draft application. You can see our 3 steps here in this new process on the right-hand side. Before scheduling the scoping session, the applicant must submit the draft application. And there's requirements for the draft application in addition to all the other current requirements in an aquaculture application. So this is going to be kind of an operational plan that would describe any off-lease activity associated with the proposed farm, including a plan for access to the site, landing of a product. There'll be, of course, that list of coastal property owners within 500 feet of the site. We're going to want to make sure that's a complete list. But the town really may have to assist the applicant in identifying these coastal property owners. And certainly the town should certify that the contact list for those owners is complete and accurate, as they would do in a land-based zoning type situation. So just to continue with the draft application, when we accept the draft application, we will notify the town or towns if it happens to be on a town line or something. We'll send it to the listserv, and we'll also instruct the applicant to begin scheduling the scoping session in the town closest to the application. The applicant, onus is on the applicant here to secure a space and to hold this session to basically collect information. But once the scoping session is scheduled, the applicant will send notice to the property owners that are listed on that application, as it is accepted by CRMC. The applicant will also notify CRMC of the session, its meeting time, location details, and CRMC will communicate that to the town as well as post it on the aquaculture listserv for any other interested stakeholders. Now, the town may also publish notice of the scoping session as they see fit, and certainly the town would review the draft application prior to the meeting for consistency with local zoning ordinances or really any other concerns they may have. Now, the scoping session itself. So here, we're now into our second step within this new process. The purpose of this session really is to familiarize the general public with the proposal, right? It's kind of an introduction of the proposal, allow the public an opportunity to provide the applicant with additional local information to inform development of the application. Again, that is really the purpose for this notification, is to help inform development of the application. And also, to allow the public opportunity to ask any questions of the applicant. Now, there are some considerations for this. There's some of them. The applicant obviously should be required to attend the scoping session himself. You know, he may have various other people there in support, consultants or other employees that may be supporting him in this effort, but the applicant should be there and should be prepared to present and answer questions. The scoping session is, well, not a public meeting, it's certainly open to the public. Also, town officials, anyone who might serve on a town body, certainly anyone is welcome to attend these sessions. We will be notifying them through the listserv, so anyone who wanted to join would have the opportunity to. Now, scoping session should be scheduled in a manner that is conducive for public participation. It really makes sense with regards to location, time, and place. So, for example, it should be a publicly accessible building, such as a library, community center, town hall, and it should be held, during non-working hours, such as on the weekday evenings or weekend. The town would probably have to also work with the applicant in this regard to help him secure the space, but many towns obviously provide spaces for community events like this. Now, CRMC's attendance at the scoping session is discretionary, and that's really so that it can be scheduled without having to, account for CRMC's availability. But also, it is the applicant's meeting. It's not CRMC's meeting; it's the applicant's, duty to do this. And CRMC gets involved a little later, but during this process, after the scoping session, there may be good reason to revise an application. So you can see here I've circled this revised application step. Now, CRMC may accept this revised application if it's not in a completely different area, right? If it is in a really different area, then the applicant may be required to go back to kind of the beginning with a new draft, which we would notice for a new scoping session. But once you've completed all these steps, then we will kind of return to our established existing process, which is the preliminary determination. And when scheduled, obviously CRMC will publish notice of this meeting, the PD meeting, that is a preliminary determination meeting, to the listserv, and we include a copy of the application and also any accepted revisions. We also send notice of the meeting to the property owners. This is CRMC now sending notice of this PD meeting to the property owners listed on the application. Now, as is currently the process now, the town may choose to hold a PD meeting, where it sees fit, and they also may choose to publish notice of this meeting if they see fit. Many towns hold PD meetings with their harbor commission or other town body, and that can be publicized through that agenda or any other way that the town may feel is necessary. So now we've moved on. You can see our 3 phases here, revisiting this. We are now out of phase 1, and I'm just going to continue to walk you through the application kind of flow chart to highlight some of these other minor changes, but I think they're important. So when you satisfied all the preliminary determination requirements, you can then move to the full category B application. And once that is accepted as complete by CRMC, we do publish a 30-day public notice. That's usually put onto our website, but we're also going to post notification to the Aquaculture Listserv, the closest town, and the property owners that are listed on that application. Now, we're revamping our public notice format a little bit. So, we will include a copy of the application as has been standard practice, but we will also try to include a standardized NOAA chart and, of course, reference to any related file numbers. This could include the BD file number, which is different than a full category B number, or an existing lease number if it's in a proposed expansion, or if it's really any related file that would make sense to notify the public about. So also during this phase 2 application review, after the 30-day public notice, we have Marine Fisheries Councils meetings, often through their subcommittee of the Shellfish Advisory Panel. And as I mentioned, we will post notice of those meetings on the Aquaculture Listserv. And that is a new process. So getting to our final phase, which is the final decision at a CRMC public hearing, we will post notice of these hearings to the listserv, to the closest towns as we have, and also to now new the listed property owners on the application. And again, we will reference any related file numbers to that application in the notice. So to recap, here is our flow diagram again. And you can see our new process in that red square in the top left, and all the notification requirements that we propose along the way. Now, what we are requesting from the base SAMP working group is feedback. We want feedback, comments, recommendations on these proposed concepts, and we will be accepting those comments up until the end of the month. And you can send those comments to me, and that's my email address there, bgetch@crmc.ri.gov. And the reason for the deadline of December 31st is we have to send any proposed new changes to any aspect of the coastal resource management program to our policy and procedure subcommittee for review and recommendation for implementation. We expect that subcommittee to meet sometime in January of 2022. And one of the things that they're going to need to recommend to us for implementation is some of these things could be implemented administratively. However, other aspects of these changes may require rulemaking, public hearings, and things like that. So those determinations will be made at the policy and procedure subcommittee level with input from our legal counsel. But CRMC will continue to work on some of these other issues that were identified through the stakeholder process as well. And we will certainly present follow-up proposals at a later date as we develop them. So finally, I'd like to thank you all for your participation. This would not be possible without you. And I quote here our regulations, which state clearly that public participation is really necessary for the development of our coastal resource management program. And we really do rely on local governments, public-private organizations, and of course all the private citizens to help us with these planning processes. So I just wanted to thank you for being here and taking the time to listen.
Thanks, Ben. Ben, can you just clarify that this is a working group meeting, so we're asking for informal input right now. So even though we're asking for written comment, we're in an informal process right now. Is that accurate?
Yes, yeah, that's true. And we will certainly be sharing the slides from the presentation with you all, but we will also very soon have a couple page document that outlines pretty much what I covered today, and so it might be a little more easily digestible.
Great, thanks, Ben. And we've got several comments, and I've made a list of the people who have done this. If you would like to ask your question verbally, if you could raise your hand virtually, so that I can, I'll reach out to you, but if not, I will ask the question. So Ben, Dick, and Jim Boyd is joining us too. So hi, Jim, good to see you. Nice tie. So Dick Pastore asked the first question, Ben, what's the form of the notification? Is it certified, for example? Is it a certified letter?
So that's not something we've decided yet, but we have to balance the benefit that this notification process brings to the application process, with the burden that it would put on applicants as well. We are asking a lot of applicants already, and we're asking more of them now. And I don't think certified mail necessary for effective notification. There are certainly other methods, and CRMC will also be sending notification itself to those listed property owners after the scoping session. So,
All right. Thank you. And then Skid's off the phone now, so I'll ask his question. Who will provide the mailing addresses, contact information for the homes in the 500-foot radius?
right. So this is an important aspect of this concept, because that is not necessarily information CRMC has. It's information the town has. So the town will have to work with the applicant, much like they would work with anyone who's working through a zoning application, land side, to help identify what these properties are and what the contact information for those property owners are based on the most current records.
Great. Phil Capaldi, and Thor, I see your hand raised. So when we get to your question, I will ask you to unmute yourself, but Phil is next. And Phil had a question about the listserv. Is that the space where members for the public or the SAP state objection or not objection? And he asked a question about, again, the certified mail thing, which I think you've answered. So can you talk about the purpose of the listserv and how we're going to use that? Is that interactive? Is that back and forth, for example?
No, the listserv is designed to be a non-posting moderated list. So it really is just to send notification. It is not meant to be a forum for discussion. If any member responding to a notification through the listserv has a comment or has information it wants to get to CRMC, then they should email me directly. I cannot guarantee that if you respond to our listserv email address, that message will be received. It's much better to email staff directly.
Great. Thor, you're next. Thanks. You can unmute yourself. There you go.
Thanks, Jennifer. Hey, thanks, Ben, for laying this out. It just seems to me, I've watched a couple of these processes, and while they all, I'm sure, have their unique spin, a recurring theme seems to be, why was I not notified? And it occurs to me as well that 500 feet would look like not much at all. I understand you want to manage the burden to the applicant. On the other hand, a lot of the people who might have an issue with something that's going to show up on the coastline around here live more than 500 feet away. And I would encourage you to figure out, maybe with community involvement, I don't know how you're actually going to do it, would be happy to have a chat about that. But power this up so that the notification is much broader, almost demand more town involvement, increase the distance, be well beyond 500 feet, figure out how to expand the listserv so that you actually get a meaningful portion of the population on it. And it would just seem like that would help head off all of this. Why was I not notified? I'm such an important person, which I keep hearing at these things. So I hope this comment is helpful. And again, I'd be happy to talk to you. I was a marketer in a previous life.
Thanks, Thor. As I said, 500 feet is consistent with our water type zoning. And to the degree that we are considering use along a shoreline and the qualities of that shoreline, it has been determined to be 500 feet.
I get it.
So we are providing notification not for the benefit of those that may live within such a radius, but for the benefit of the application, the applicant, to benefit the development of that application with local knowledge and information that might not be readily available.
And okay, great. And again, these comments are great. Please send them in to Ben. Another question from Dick Pastore, Ben, about in the scoping session, who's going to, how is CRMC going to find out or figure out what transpired during the scoping meeting if you're not attending?
Well, it's not necessarily too much of a concern of mine. It is the purpose of the meeting is to introduce the application for people to ask questions and provide input to the applicant. All that information should be reviewed again at a PD meeting, which CRMC staff would be at. So it is a way for the applicant to collect information, perhaps revise an application if necessary, before going into that PD meeting with CRMC.
Great. And yes, and so Dennis Erkin had a question. Ben, will a scoping session application receive a CRMC file number that will be trackable through the entire process and geographically located?
So this is a part of an expanded, even though this is part of an expanded PD process. So that draft application would receive a PD number. And every application, that would result in a PD meeting, after this development process would have the same number. When an applicant moves from the application development phase to the application review phase with a full category B application, that receives a new number. However, a 30-day public notice and notification of that application will include reference to any past applications or file numbers related to it, such as the PD.
Thanks, Ben. So Gary Dorfman, I'm so glad you are going to ask your question in person or verbally. So if you want to unmute and ask your question, it's a long one.
Actually, I had several nested together, so I excuse myself for my speech. I've got a cold, so I apologize. It seems to me that, Ben, while you say that the scoping session is, and by the way, I applaud this change wholeheartedly. But while you say the scoping session is for the benefit of the applicant, that then raises several questions. Number one, as Thor mentioned, there are people who may have knowledge about that local area who are beyond 500 feet from the boundary, because some local areas extend all along a neighboring shoreline. Hence, I would add my request to reconsider that, because I think the applicant would indeed benefit from the wisdom of people who might live 600 feet away or 800 feet away or even 1,000 feet away because of the currents and the shoreline around there. So that's one question, one comment. The question relates again to presence at the scoping session. If no one from the CRMC or the town or regulatory bodies must attend, but only may attend, they may not get the flavor of input, the wisdom of the people you are seeking input from to the applicant. Hence, when the PD arrives, that whole context would be lost when reviewing the PD. That is complicated by the fact that in the slide, I believe you say that it's up to the town whether the PD hearing is scheduled at a convenient time, public, transparent, etc. So if there's no context from the scoping meeting, and by bad luck or bad chance, the PD meeting is also not attended by some of those same individuals, then CRMC won't know of this context during their PD review. And that's worrisome to me as someone who cares about the shoreline and the waters, but also I think it would be worrisome to CRMC to lose that context and all that valuable information during your review process. Might you consider the value of that in your proposal?
The value of the scoping session, again, is for the applicant. It's not for CRMC. It's for the applicant to develop his application, which CRMC will then review at the preliminary determination meeting.
Understood, but if the preliminary determination meeting, for whatever reason, is not attended by the same people who attended the scoping session.
Well, they would be notified. The same people would be notified, and the Listserv would also receive notification of the PD meeting. And I would just encourage anyone who's interested in aquaculture development to be on our Listserv. And you'll receive due notice of any events throughout the state.
So I just sent a list of the people who are up. Lisa, you're next. I'm picking people who have not spoken yet. So, and then we'll go back to people who have already commented. So Lisa, you're next.
Thank you. I think the additions that you added are great. And whether it's 500 feet or 1,000 feet, I think that, not that it's insignificant, but I think that neighbors generally talk. Believe me, we know this at the local level. So I guess one thing I was thinking about, and maybe like you said, Ben, it's not of your concern, but I'm just thinking that you might have neighbors saying they want X, Y, and Z, and then it will get to CRMC, the preliminary determination, and maybe something they asked for isn't consistent with the regulations, maybe something. So there's nobody involved in that initial process that really knows the regulations, I guess, is my only concern. And I'm kind of likening that process to our technical review committee meeting at the local level, where we have just really basic minutes that I just forward on to the planning commission, so they at least know what was discussed. And certainly we could do that and send them on to you. I think it would be helpful probably to you. So what was my other? I also had a question about the legal requirement in terms of the OMA, the Open Meetings Act, for that local scoping session. Is
Well,
there
it's
any?
not a government, it's not a government meeting. I mean, it's not-
Correct, okay.
It cannot be
All right.
subject to open meetings. It's a scoping session. It's literally just an info session.
Gotcha. And I, like I said, I'm all in favor of it. And I just wanted to confirm, who determines the completeness of that application? That's done before the scoping session by CRMC?
Yes, so the receipt of the draft application there would be a determination of completeness. And upon that determination, we would post notice to the aquaculture listserv saying CRMC has received a draft application. Please stay tuned for details on the scoping session. And then when we receive the details in the scoping session, we would likewise publish that to the listserv and to the town too.
Great, thank you. I think that will go a long way in making them feel included.
Thank you, Lisa. Greg?
Hi, Ben.
Hi.
I saw that you mentioned early that part of the change in the early application process was that the applicant would have to identify how they plan to access the site. I think that's great. That's neat to see that you guys are considering that. The other thing I wanted to know if you considered, or if you would consider, is as part of that initial application that the applicant identify the closest public access point to their application site. Because I think not only is that helpful for others, but I think that would start to give them right away a sense of whether they were, stepping into a hot, I'm not sure what the right word I want to use, but I thought that would be very helpful if you early on identified how close to a public right-of-way site the application was intended to be.
Right. So there are many ways to access the shore. Some are through designated public rights of way. Some are through state-owned properties that aren't designated.
Right.
And there are many other rights of way that likewise exist that may not be designated or used by different communities in different ways. This is about notification. That's an issue I think we've captured through our scoping issue identification process with the group. And that may be something that we come up with certain standards for. But when it comes to this particular requirement, what we're talking about today with notification, I don't think it's directly relevant though. And I would mention a lot of aquaculture sites aren't anywhere near any right of way or public access point, and sometimes even those that are still a fair distance to really affect anything. But it's something to be considered. I mean, it would be easy to put into our application materials a requirement of just identifying the closest public access point and what's the distance from the proposal to that site. And that would probably be helpful and something we would consider.
Thanks.
Thank you, Greg. Next is Don Libby. Don has a question. If CRMC is not requiring certified mail notice, how does CRMC and the town or city determine proof of notice?
Well, it's not something we've entirely fleshed out, but we would probably, we do require that the applicant give CRMC notice as well of the scheduled meeting. So we would probably want a copy of the letter that was sent out to the various groups with the CC list. So essentially we would receive that mail. If all the mailings were done at the same time, then we could assume that that mail hopefully reached the intended recipients. But this is an aspect of the proposal that we're willing to take comments on.
Hey, Jen, can I jump in? It's Jeff.
Yes, please.
I do want to address that particularly because for every application that the CRMC has that goes out to public notice, a requirement is to mail that public notice to CRMC. So we mail that notice to ourselves. So we would require an applicant to do the same here to guarantee that at least through the United States Postal Service, CRMC received the notice as per the list of people on that applications list. So I do think that that would be something that we'd incorporate for sure.
Great.
Yeah, and that's what I was alluding to with exactly Jeff's.
Hi, Jen, this is Don Libby. I had a couple other questions, but I just wanted to comment on that certified mail. I'm a retired attorney, and one thing that is always required in litigation or any other matters is evidence and proof of notice, so that somebody has the right to appear and be heard. So I think the certified mail thing is something that really needs to be looked at so that there is proof of notice to whatever the abutter situation is involved, whether it's 500 feet, 1,000 feet, or half a mile. My second question, or one of my other two questions is, if CRMC is delegating notice for the scoping session to the applicant with assistance from the city or town to determine who the abutters are, can the city or town implement its own notice process in order to invite meaningful public engagement? And the next question, which is probably simpler.
And Don, remember, we've got other people here, so thank you. Why don't we start with that one?
Well, the town's always welcome to notify their community however they see fit.
Okay, great. And then quick one, does the scoping session include a site visit or require a site visit?
By who?
By whoever's invited to the scoping session. Maybe it's in two parts, one at the site, one at the town hall.
Well, I don't think so. The site visit would be by everyone invited. No, I don't think so. When someone puts in a PD application, they're required to mark the four corners of the proposal with buoys with the application number. We could reference the fact that that has happened, and anyone who wants to go and observe where the proposal is may do so.
Okay, so we're going to move to Deb Hagan's question. Deb, I think I understand your question, but if you could just make sure I'm answering it. It's about the time of notice. So for example, will there be a minimum requirement for the notice required by the applicant for the scoping session? Like, for example, will there be like a 30-day ahead of the scheduled meeting for the scoping session? And also, would there be like a 30-day notice or certain time period before the PD is set as well, Ben?
Yeah, so there's currently no, under our current process, there are no time requirements for notification of a PD meeting. We haven't come up with any minimum notification, time requirements of notice before a scoping session either. My only comment in this regard is, we're happy to take your comments on this. I think it should be within a reasonable time. My own opinion. What's reasonable? Reasonable minds may disagree, but I think 2 weeks is probably sufficient notice.
Okay. Jeff Gardner has a comment and a observation. In his experience, Ben, he has had a final application not rejected or approved, but rather he's been required to reach a compromise with an objector. And his feeling is the chart does not show this option.
Well, that is an option that is, CRMC does not support an application for whatever reason. CRMC will always encourage the applicant and objectors to try to work out a compromise solution. That is always preferable than a denial or an appeal.
Okay, great. And we're going back to some additional questions from people who've already asked questions. For example, Phil Capaldi, would you like to ask this question, Phil? Phil is saying some of the platforms don't have the hand raised.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that.
Okay.
I was just curious about who's on the subcommittee or for the policy and procedures for aquaculture.
So this is our policy and procedure subcommittee on all aspects of the coastal resource management program, not just on aquaculture.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Bob Rowe, back to you. You've had a couple of comments. I could pick one, but do you have one in particular you'd like to ask? You're on mute.
Thought that when I held the space bar down, I was unmuted. Apparently not. So I'm struggling to see the difference between this preliminary scoping meeting and the PD. And it strikes me that if there is a difference, it's pretty fine. And I'm not sure that it's serving an additional value. So please help me understand where we're headed with this.
Sure, that's a great comment, Bob. So it is very similar to a PD meeting. The difference is, I guess, the context, right? So in the PD meeting, it is a CRMC meeting, even if it's held with the town, and it is to review the application and its feasibility and make recommendations for going forward. The scoping session is really a chance for the applicant to meet with the community outside that process informally, share information with the community and stakeholders to inform the development of the application. So it gives the applicant a chance to use the information that he's collected through the scoping session to either build upon the draft application he's already submitted, or perhaps revise it before going to a PD meeting. You know, it might be, it's possible that if someone had a few alternative locations in mind, you could kind of shop these locations through the scoping session process before having to move to the PD phase.
So in my experience, I mean, that sort of interaction happens at the PD as well. There, you know, objections come up and people offer compromises and the application gets tweaked to try and meet some of those concerns. So without someone of official status running the meeting, I could see that this could go sideways pretty quickly.
Yep, that, you know, it is going to be a lot to ask of the applicant. I recognize that. It is the hope of CRMC that the applicant would, you know, really think long and hard about their application. You know, listen to the community, get to know the community, let the community get to know them, so that these kinds of alternatives or recommendations could be incorporated even earlier on. That's about all I can say.
Hey, Ben, if I could just interject here, because I think I don't want people to have the impression here that these are two different meeting processes. This is really an enhanced PD process. It just happens to have a scoping phase to it in the very beginning to get some input to the applicant from the community to help them shape a proposal, which may not go forward to the PD process based on the input they get at the scoping session, or they get a proposal that gets modified as a result of that scoping process that goes through the more formal PD process. And then if it advances through PD, then it would go to a formal application stage. But the idea behind this scoping session is to help the applicant be informed by the community about issues that the applicant may not be privy to or have any knowledge of, whereas the local community has a lot of knowledge to help the applicant with shaping a proposal.
Great. Skid, any follow-up?
Yeah, I mean, I still see that role happening at the PD in every PD I've ever been to. There's always a little give and take. There's always a learning process. Now, if that is too onerous for CRMC to participate in, I guess, but I still think that the PD serves that role quite well. I certainly, in the meetings that I've been to, there's been a lot of give and take. A lot of information is shared, and having the aquaculture coordinator there leading the meeting keeps it from erupting into something that's probably less productive.
Well, I can't raise my hand on my device.
Go ahead, Phil.
This is because I think the spirit of this is prior and within the process, the public isn't a part of it. So this step is to at least get the dialogue started before the tweaks that happen at the CMRC level through the process. It's an opportunity. People have said that it's not transparent. People don't know what's going on. And when they do object, it's like, well, it's already been through the highly regulated process. So this is at least one step to get riparian right owners notification, not people, general public. The onus is still on them for the listserv.
So I'm fully supportive of the notification of the abutters and having increased participation of the public at the PD process. I'm just questioning whether this particular advanced scoping session adds value to the PD process. Because in the PD process that I'm familiar with, it's been quite successful in that there is a free exchange of information. And I'm just questioning whether an additional meeting is going to help us, but I'll put that away now. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Skid. Ben or Jeff, Jim, any comments on that, or we should move to the next person?
No, I appreciated the back and forth actually, and I was glad that there was that. So we'll definitely take that and hear that as we move forward. But yes, if we can have the next question, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay,
let
go ahead,
me-
Jim.
I'm sorry, Jen. I just want to add one
No,
thing.
please.
That is precisely why we're having this meeting tonight, to make this proposal and get some feedback from the working group and others, and which is why we look forward to your written comments with regard to this new proposal, as Ben had indicated earlier. So we look forward to your comments so that we can take them into consideration to perhaps further improve on our proposal.
And also, to Bob's point, this is concept phase at this stage right now. We conceivably, you could get rid of the scoping session, still retain the notification of the coastal property owners, and have that all just occur in one meeting at the PD meeting. I mean, that is something we would be willing to take comment on.
Okay, Gary had a question Gary, your hand's up. Do you want to ask the question about the draft application?
Sure. Might the CRMC consider making a modification to the PD application to include a brief summary of the scoping session by the applicant, at least to the extent of listing the issues that were raised and how those were addressed, to demonstrate, listening to this discussion is very useful to understand sort of this give and take, to list the various issues that were raised and how they were addressed between the scoping session and the formal PD application. I think that would again be very useful to demonstrate the collaboration between the community, the attendees, the applicant, and would be useful for the context of reviewing the PD. That was one question. Related to that, Ben, I believe you said that the draft application would get a file number that would be retained, I think, for the PD application.
So it would be part of the PD process. So it would
Right.
receive the same number. Yes. This
So
is-
if an applicant withdrew after the draft application, but before the PD, while you don't maintain the DEM map, would it still be on the map?
It might not be on the map at all at this stage. The map is not updated so regularly that we can actually post notifications on the map for these notices. And the map is maintained by DEM, not by CRMC.
Understood. So if it gets a file number but is withdrawn before the PD, it wouldn't go on the map. Is that correct?
That would depend on DEM's resources. We don't maintain that map.
How about my previous question about the PD application itself?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
I don't know if I can. Hold on. My previous question about modifying the PD application.
Oh, yes.
include
Well,
the-
certainly if there was right. So certainly if there was a revision that came out of a scoping session, that would be in, we want some justification for the revision, how it works, how it doesn't. The PD report is something that's written by staff. I think an applicant moving through this process would probably be wise to document their efforts throughout it. I don't
I'm
know.
also concerned about documenting what didn't get changed. I heard the following issues. I addressed 9 of the 10. The 10th one I decided not to address. and
Well, that
here's
would be
the
then,
reason
that would
why.
then be discussed at the PD meeting.
It would, okay.
Yeah, I mean, presumably the same people are getting notified of the scoping session, are getting notified of the PD meeting, and they're certainly welcome to attend the PD meeting as well.
Understood.
If they have input they want to get to CRMC, and they want to ensure it gets to CRMC. They could also send written comment to CRMC ahead of a PD meeting if they couldn't attend.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mike Rice had, Mike, do you want to say this or do you want me to, are you able to?
Sure. My question is really to Ben. In this new system, would it be optional or mandatory for the applicant, given the fact that it was stated that this is for the benefit of the applicant?
So the idea that it would be a prerequisite to holding the PD meeting. And obviously the PD meeting is a prerequisite to putting in a full application for a lease. So it would be a required step along this process. Again, it would put a burden on the applicant. We have to balance that with the benefit of this process. And that's part of why we're having this discussion. But yes, it would, to answer your question, it would be a required part of the PD process.
Phil, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, so if I'm in aquaculture, potential leasee, I'm about to start the process, I mark the site with CMRC's corner buoys That way I can determine 500 feet or whatever to the property. So it exists in the CRMC file at that point. A file is created, correct?
Upon acceptance of a draft application.
Sure, okay. Then the scoping sequence, the meeting would happen. I would host a meeting. So that file and that process shouldn't disappear.
No, it's a PD file.
Right, but CRMC then, because if I have to follow the, least, I have to map it out and put a file number attached to the corner buoys, that stays with it, correct?
Only through the PD process. After the PD process is complete and a full application is received.
Okay.
then
I
you-
think part of the transparency issue, when you look at leases in Quanticontag Pond, you see that none have ever really been rejected, but you know that there's been meetings where applicants have modified the lease and it's changed. So if there needs to be transparency when something happens in the process that indicates there's been either an altering of the lease.
Yes, that is a modification of the SAMP process. Those would be notified through our aquaculture listserv.
Right, but there's
Include a
there's
30-day public
no
notice
but there's
and a
no
public hearing.
traceable mark based on the file numbers of that. The numbers change.
If it's, and which is why I will include on all notices, either through the listserv or our 30-day public notices, reference to
Okay.
pre-existing
All right.
file numbers that are related.
All right, I appreciate that, Ben, and I know you did extend a hand. I will show you my following of some processes in the numbering system that hopefully you can,
I'm happy to walk you through it again, Phil. I can totally do that offline.
yeah, no, and I want you to see what the public sees too from the leasing
And
thing.
I've heard that feedback, which is why
Okay.
I implemented the listserv, and I'm including now all reference to previous applications or
Okay.
related applications in notifications. So there should be no further confusion.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben.
Okay, I don't see any additional questions. Did we missing anybody? Okay. Ben, is there anything more you'd like to say?
No, just thank you for your input and feedback. This is important. I think if anybody wants to talk to me offline or whatever, the door is always open. Pick up the phone, shoot me an email, whatever. I'm happy to talk to anybody. This is a process that we are developing. There's going to be more to come based on the various other issues that we've identified through this process. This is our first stab at addressing some of these issues. And so I thank you for your time and listening to our ideas.
Hey, Jen, can I say something?
Sure.
This has been going back and forth, and I think Don had a good point about the formal notification. I don't think anything was determined. But that formal notification needs to be by green card, and it needs to, and that green card notification has to be presented to CRMC so that all of this confusion with respect to notification and abutters and everything else, which is kind of gotten churned in the narrative here or in the dialogue here, is cleared up, because in particular the comments that Don made is right on. I mean, saying that a reasonable notification for time before meetings and stuff, like, you can't leave things that open. This stuff has got to be set down in concrete so that the process is not objected to.
We're talking about a preliminary determination phase, an application development phase where nothing is really being decided. CRMC will be providing notice itself to the listed property owners after the scoping meeting. That includes for the PD meeting, for the 30-day public notice, for a public hearing. That's notification coming from CRMC. The applicant before the scoping meeting will be providing notice to those listed folks. And I think with the help of the town, we can trust him to do that.
Well, I don't know.
Maybe the town would be willing to send the notification on his behalf.
I don't think they would be, Ben. Those are about $7.50 items just at the mail, at the postal service, and you got to put them together.
Correct.
It takes a long time. It's not the town's responsibility to facilitate the CRMC regulatory process. It's up to CRMC. So
Well,
I
we're putting this
understand-
on.
let me finish.
Okay.
Let me finish. You're going to provide formal notification during the process, that's fine. But if you want the scoping meetings to be of substantive use, then you should perhaps that notification should be provided such that that scoping meeting can move on and you don't end up with objections halfway down the line in the whole process. I've been through this for 35 years, believe me. And so has Lisa, and so has everybody else. And you continue to hear objections from lawyers and regulators and everybody else. And you need to formalize this more for your own benefit, if nothing else.
So I can address that, and we absolutely are going to. That's why we've run it by you tonight. I heard loud and clear that the distance of notification might be an issue. That's definitely something we want to continue talking about. 500 feet or greater, absolutely can hear. They'll listen to that. The certified mail, that's a big discussion, Dick. As Ben already mentioned, in terms of notification, when it becomes a litigatory issue, as one of the attorneys mentioned, that's in the decision-making process. Scoping meetings aren't decision-making processes. They're information gathering processes. So that's something we'll weigh, we'll listen to, we'll figure that one out. But I think the bigger issue is the general notification and reaching folks in a broader fashion through various means. So I heard that one loud and clear.
And the formality of that, Jeff, I think is really important, but thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Anna Gerber from DEM said that DEM can send out a listserv notification through their marine fisheries listserv, announcing the new aquaculture listserv as well. So she's going to be promoting the CRMC listserv. So thank you for that. We have a question from Kenny.
Sure, thanks for this, and I appreciate Ben, Jeff, and Jim, you taking the time here, because I've obviously followed this very closely. I guess a point of clarification: we have until the end of the month to give you comments on this, which it sounds like you'll be taking in. So this is just about the notification process. My question about the back end of this, once you have that notification, the whole concept of the decision making and how you come to a decision, will that be open for discussion, and feedback through this SAMP process as well, or is this just limited? Is the SAMP only looking at notifications? So, for example, I think about the Rasso case that just came out last week. I don't know, as I listen to you guys, whether the notification process would have changed that at all. I have no idea. But there were issues decided at the subcommittee level that probably weren't related to notification, but that application got fairly far down the line. And I'm wondering about that, whether you will be accepting comment or when that kind of comment could be provided in this process.
Yeah, sure. If you have issues with the process from A to Z, I'd like to hear them. I actually would ask, not here, but maybe offline, more specific on your Rasso question, because I don't think I followed it exactly right. But the decision-making process is pretty set right now on not only aquaculture, but on how we handle things. And in particular for aquaculture, that gets kicked to a subcommittee. That's an exhaustive process. That's also information gathering, making sure we've notified everybody. But in the end, the decision-making process is all in the public realm in public hearings. So if you have comments on that, I'd like to specifically hear them. Because basically everything is on the table, but what we've heard over the past 6 months is the front end is a really big deal. And the front end is something that we're trying to address right now.
No, I could follow up with you guys offline, but it's already in writing. I think there's a group of concerned citizens that sent in a letter to the
I know you're talking about now. Yeah. No, that process is not concluded.
But there were suggestions in that letter from the concerned citizens on ways to improve your process.
Yep. No, I
And,
understand. I got you.
None of those were addressed here. And I just want to make sure that you have there is an opportunity, or maybe there's not, but I just wanted to clarify that for any of the over 200 people who signed that letter, because we need to get back to them and let them know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, I don't see any more questions in the chat. I don't see anyone raising their hand or trying to say anything. So I'm gonna pass it back. So thank you, Ben, for doing that. That was great. Good back and forth, and pass it to Jeff.
Thanks. Yeah, and I appreciate it. And I've already discussed some of the things that I wanted to wrap up with, and that was what we've heard today. And I heard, and I know all the staff heard on the notification end, and some very good input on that. So those are easily comments that we can start addressing now. But as we've also all mentioned, you have more to say, fire off emails, put a letter in the mail. It doesn't matter how you do it. Let us know by the end of the month what you think of this, what ways can be improved, tweaked, taken off the table and put something brand new on, whatever you want. What my point is, by putting the end of the month timeframe on it, we want to move on this. We want to make changes. We want to make it better. And we can talk and talk and talk, and we have been for 6 months. Now it's time to start doing something. So please, however you want to get us those comments, get them to us so that we can get them in front of you again, and then in front of our Planning and Procedures Subcommittee, so that any type of actual rule change has to begin there. Ben also mentioned that some of these things can be administrative, and that's like the application requirements, the additional pieces of information. I think Greg mentioned the nearest right-of-way site, using a NOAA chart. All those things are things that administratively we can do right now. And so those are good comments to incorporate, and we'd like to start moving on those too. So that's why we want to just say by the end of the month, please let us know so that we can start formalizing this stuff and moving it forward. That said, this presentation we're going to be putting on our website and Jen's website, the Sea Grant website, tomorrow. So you'll have it there to reference back on. And I know Jennifer was asking that all the questions be put in the chat. That's so we can catalog this, and so that we don't lose track of everything and we can address them. So again, it's while it's an extremely informal process, it's also formal at the same time, so that we can catalog what we have and move forward. Thank you all for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
You can't coordinate with Jonathan.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Good night. Have a good evening.
Thank you.